morning, everyone. So yesterday we were discussing the transition from the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy to the seventh. There's an echo.
Is the mic on Curtis's side or on the iPad?
Oh, Curtis says it's good. Was it your phone? Okay, we should be good. Yeah, test, test, test. Everything sound okay to everyone? Okay,
Yes, it's good.
awesome. So we're talking about the transition from the sixth to the seventh. We talked about the circumstances on the ground in 1989. Okay, okay, you ready? I'm on Shimen. She was just switching rooms. You tell me when you're ready. Okay. So we looked at the circumstances in 1989 with the Cold War. We saw the USSR and the United States were in conflict. We saw that the papacy was on the side of the United States in that moment. And then we talked about what led up to that conflict. We saw that the papacy was dethroned in 1798 by France. By specifically atheistic France. And that at that moment, the papacy has one goal in mind. The goal is to get back on top of the world, to become the leader again. In order for it to do that goal, it has to take out the power that dethroned it. And we trace that through history briefly. And we saw that this conflict is going to rear up after or during World War II. The papacy is going to get into a tenuous alliance with Germany. Where they'll use Germany to try to overthrow the USSR. Germany is unsuccessful. The Cold War begins. and the papacy will now try to use the United States in order to take back what it had lost. But we said there was something funny that happened in 1989. And that funny thing that happened was the United States didn't didn't do what it was supposed to do. The United States was supposed to defeat the USSR, atheism, and then the papacy up to um, raise the papacy up to rule the world. And instead, what they did, they're going to say, you know what, papacy, I think we can do this on our own. They take the aspiration that the papacy had as their own. And from that point forward, the papacy is falls out of prophetic history. Well, the papacy then falls out of prophetic history. And the reason I say that is because they're no longer contending for the King of the North role. What does Let's explore that for just a second. So we'll come down here. So Elder Parmenter yesterday, he looked at Revelation 17. Test, test, test. Okay. Kurt Shaman. She can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay. So, yep, I'll restate that for you. Okay, so we have Revelation 17. I have an echo. And Elder Parmenter looked at the woman and the beast. And we identified the beast as these kings of Bible prophecy. We have Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, pagan Rome, papal Rome. We have these we have these kingdoms going through history. And the question he asked was, is the beast the king of the north? And we determined that it was not. That the woman represented the king of the north. Now, let's talk about what the woman is. What is the woman? A church, someone said. Let's explore that a little bit more. Is it any church? Is it a specific church? Is it, give me some information. Is Mormonism today a church, the king of the north, the woman? But based upon our definition we just gave, it's a church. Why isn't it the king of the north? Francisco? Curtis?
The characteristics don't fit the prophecy, you know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's yeah, it just doesn't fit.
Why doesn't it fit?
Characteristics don't fit.
Which character? I'm sorry. Which characteristics?
World dominance. It's never had world dominance.
Does in 537 AD, 537 AD, who is the king of the north? What? Anyone. Doesn't have to be. I'm not. $537. What? Gloria?
Paganism, pagan Rome, paganism,
Which
paganism. Yeah.
is that your final answer? Okay, so let's look. 538. We have the 1260. And basically, my question is, who's the king of the north the day before that prophecy begins? And Gloria says paganism. Anyone else? Anyone else, and then why?
I'm not good on my remembering dates right now. But I think I would say there's not a king of the north when you're asking.
Do you want me to say 508? 507? Yeah, I'll
When the papacy gets its,
Yeah, stop.
oh,
Yeah, I don't.
I guess I don't remember my dates real well. But did they have the state? So if they don't have the state, are they king of the north?
That's the question. That's part of the question. So we're saying the king of the north, sorry, we're saying the woman is the king of the north. And we're saying the papacy's reign begins in 1260. And Gloria told us it was in 537 that it's paganism, not papalism. Elaine added a little wrench in there for us. And we'll be mushy about our dates and we'll say 507. But the premise of the question remains the same. So our question originally was, why isn't Mormonism or Scientology or Judaism the woman? Comment up here. So.
For the king of the north. For the king of the north to become king of the north, don't they first have to take down 3 powers? So in that case, in these dates, 507, 537, the 3 powers have not yet been taken down. The paralyzed Vandals and the Ostrogoths.
Why does they need to take down these powers? You don't have to, anyone can answer if you don't have to. If you want to, you can.
That's the repeat of the history. I'm not sure why, but that's what we've learned. It's the history.
Translating. You okay, Shimon? Okay. Oh, you're good. Yeah, no, you're fine. Gloria?
I would say it's because they have to take down the religion that's in conflict. Like Arianism was in conflict back in those days.
Sure.
So the third power that they had to take down was the Ostrogoths. In 538 BC, and then the papacy became the world superpower. So a special characteristic of the King of the North is they have to ride on a beast.
You're uh affecting Curtis with that answer. So this is the question. And this is the question we've been talking about outside of our meetings the last day. What does it mean to be the King of the North? And who is it? So Elder Parminder gave us zoomed into this situation and showed us that there's two parts. We have the woman and the beast. And what we said yesterday is that the beast is never the woman. Or sorry, is never the King of the North. It is the woman. But this woman, is this woman the King of the North when is this woman the King of the North when they don't have a kingdom? That's the question. Is the papacy by virtue of its dogma the King of the North in 537? That's the question. And that's one of the things we've been talking about. My thought is that in order for you to be the King of the North, Shimen, can you hear me over there, Curtis? Okay, do you want me to restart? Yeah, yep. So my thought is that for you to be the King of the North, that you have to have a kingdom. You have to have a beast that you're riding. Shimen, I'm gonna switch. Give me 1 second. All right. Shimen, can you hear me? Okay. You think you're okay? Okay. Do you want me? Okay. Well, let's continue. It sounds like you're okay. It sounds okay right now. Yep, I can hear you. Okay. So in order for you to be the king of the north, you need a kingdom, I think. All right, I'm going to switch into Portuguese. Okay. So you need a king and a woman. You need a beast and a woman to be the king of the north. You need the connection. But this woman becomes the king of the north when that relationship is established. Like we read in Revelation 17:18. That she sits on over these kings. So that the question remains is who is the king of the north before that point, and what does it mean to be the king of the and what churches are the king of the north? So let's dive into let's go back to the question of why are some churches the king of the north and some aren't? Curtis?
So, do you mean let's go back as in let's go back to Babylon and figure out what made that part the king of the north?
We can go to any history. Just explain to me why some churches are and some churches aren't.
On peut aller dans n'importe quelle histoire et dis-moi pourquoi certaines églises le sont et d'autres pas.
Parmenter? Oh boy. No, I'm just kidding.
I might have missed it.
Alors,
But in that 538 history, could you just mark when I think you said the papacy? When will the papacy become? When will the papacy become the king of the north? When will the papacy be the king of the north? Or are you going to tell us?
So our options are 538, where it begins to rule. And I guess this particular history is a little bit tricky with the power that it's co-opting. Because if you want to mark it as the killing of paganism, the usurping of paganism, you might point at 508. And I'm not sure which one would be the better option. My point in this moment was more to identify a transition from paganism being the king of the north to papalism being the king of the north. And I'm maybe foggy on this specific date in this moment. And I think this probably does add an element of nuance or an element of another layer on top of it. Because the point of ruling in our history is what waymark? When's the 1260 of our history? I heard 2024. Anyone else? Louder. Worldwide, which is the waymark, close of probation. Anyone else? Sunday law. Oh, Daniel said Sunday law. So I think, and I could be wrong, but I think this is close of probation. This is the ruling 1 hour with the beast, the time of rulership. Which adds a problem. Anyone see the problem? If you're the king of the north when you begin to rule, then we would have to say, we'd be forced to say that in our time, whether you say it's the USA or the Republican Party, whatever entity you want to identify, it wouldn't be the king of the north till this point. But we say that this point of transition is 1989. That's what we said today. So there's a transition period where you still have to be counted somehow as the king of the north. And you're rising in power till you finally gain rulership. So that's the complexity we have to add to that. Curtis.
Maybe this will be helpful or maybe it won't. But if we compare and contrast Satan's church with God's church, I remember back in the day, we would look at the history of Christ and overlay the 7 churches on top of that. And we'd show how the 7th church, Laodicea, starts to wane from the time of the end till a period. And we'd see Ephesus beginning in 1999, but it's rising up until a certain point. Ephesus is born at the time of the end. And it takes a period of time until it's fully established. But basically, there's this overlapping period. I think you can make an argument that it's at 70 AD when there's that clean break.
Good. No, mine got it. My translator got it.
Repeat that with my mic.
So he's saying that the last part he's just cutting out is that we see this transition, this overlap, where one is declining and one is rising up until he's saying the close of probation, Waymart. So there is a moment or some amount of time where you can be the king of the north without full rulership. And what point would that be? I don't think it's the Sunday law. Andreas? Are we still good on our mic? Okay.
I was gonna say until the king of the south dies.
So that's the end point. But how do you start the first point? What's the mechanism? So you can have a king of the north at this point. And what do they need? They need two things to begin this process, I think. They need, and what did we define the king of the north as? What did I define? I'll take responsibility for this for this definition. What did we define the king of the north as? We said it was the woman sitting on top of a beast. It's a church and a beast, a church and a kingdom. And so this kingdom that, or this beast that is being sat on, is going to do what work for the woman? Curtis?
It's going to give it arms to do something.
A military, arms. So this point of contact where you can be the king of the north, you need a beast and you need a church. Do you need to rule the world in this moment? No. You need aspirations. And where do these aspirations come from? Who brings the aspirations to the table? Loudly if you say it. The church. The church is going to bring the aspiration to the state power, to the beast. And this church is going to say, it would be really cool if we go conquer the world together. How do you feel about that? The beast agrees. And they then have to conquer 3 geographical locations. And then they rule. So this adds a little bit of a complexity to the mix. That you can be the king of the north without actually fully and utterly ruling. Or else we run into the problem of we can't have a king of the north at 1989. Andreas?
I was just gonna ask if we can elaborate on why is it the woman that brings the aspirations? Is it from Revelation 17 or from somewhere else?
I think you can see it in Revelation 17. That it seems to be that the woman is the one influencing the kings. Alyssa?
It seems that Mormonism, Scientology, Judaism, maybe not Judaism, I don't know, but having aspirations to rule the world as well.
You said they do? I'm just for me.
So if other churches have aspirations to take over the world, then it seems the state power, the kingdoms have to choose, have to be willing participants with the church.
Yes, they have to be. I think you need aspirations, and then you need a willing participant. To go about doing that work. Let's define we'll come back to this. Okay, we're gonna pause here. And we're trying to figure out just a quick summary of what we did, our detour. We noticed that there's a conundrum present, or there's a problem present, or a question. If the 7th doesn't rule till the close of probation, then we can't define being the king of the north only as being the sole power. Well, we can't define being the king of the North as just ruling over the world. There has to be more, or else we don't have a king of the North at 1989. Gloria, and then.
So I think I agree with your model there. So at 537, I would say papalism is the king of the North, not paganism.
As we've been working through this, I've come to the same thought as well. Because it's part of that. There's got to be a transition period where you still count. Raise your hand. So, Elder Parmenter wanted me to repeat that point, and I may be walking myself right into some issues with Elder Parmenter. No, I'm just kidding. So, the original question, or the original thought that I raised was the transition point, or when does the papacy become the king of the North? And I initially, off the cuff, said 538, or I suggested it, because it's gonna rule for 1260 years from that point. But then through questioning, there has to be a transition point somewhere before that. Where you count as the king of the North, where you count as the nascent king of the North. Maybe nascent's a bad word for that, but what? It's so think about, you're the presumptive president. It's not fully official yet. And there's this transition point that leads to where you've done all of your work. And now you're ruling. Does that make sense? Because then you would have the issue of if this is the close of probation where the 7th is going to rule for 1 hour. You would break the fact that we already do have a king of the North before that point. And then my point was to try to define where we would mark it and what the characteristics would be. And I said time of the end. Because in this moment, you have a church and a state come together, and or we could say culture is far more accurate for our purposes. That have ambitions of ruling the world. Through domination and then they're going to enact that plan. Does that sound okay? Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. I don't hear. I don't hear Portuguese. Is your I don't hear your okay. So she asked how do we define ruling the world? And this is another thing we've sort of just been a little wishy-washy with. A little bit evasive. Was there more to your question?
No. I mean, sorry, I'm just thinking, is it more than just conquering because you're looking at that transitioning point. So I'm just wondering if there's significance to the definition of what you are saying it means to rule the world.
I don't know that I have a good definition of what it means to rule the world. Because that has changed throughout history what that means, the scope of it, the scale. Normally, at minimum, we're probably talking about Christendom, which we can define as the West generally. And I'll say ruling the world is at minimum that. Say that again.
The influence of Christendom?
What do you mean the oh, sorry. What do you mean influence?
Just in relation to, you said Christendom, so just in relation to, what do you mean by, because you just said Christendom, so ruling the world, I mean, is the point to get Christendom, dominating the world? I don't know what.
In the Bible, there's only a few geographical locations that count as the world. You don't have the geographical location of China, India. Normally, the areas that we do see, we have the Middle East, the Old World, which we'll define as Europe, and the New World, the United States. And so at minimum, that's what we're talking about. And whether or not it's more or less, I'm not sure. Curtis and Kathy. Oh, sorry. In front first.
I'm going to just suggest that in history, what has defined world domination is a combination of military and economic superpower.
We have a nice word for that. Unilateralism or unipolar world. Where you have one nation or one entity that has disproportionate power. Military, economic, social, maybe even, or influence.
Yes, I agree. But economic is very important because without the economic superpower, you cannot have a military superpower.
It's the driver.
All I was going to say in relation to what Victoria asked is, wouldn't ruling the world have to be in relation to the other big powers of the day?
Probably, I'd imagine. It's all relative.
So, as you said, Egypt is the big power, and then your European ones. So who are we going to make that big power today?
Which big power? Which
that needs to be conquered to make up the wall. To sympathize.
The question was, Curtis asked, which other powers are the relative powers that need to be conquered? Russia is one. Kathy, you're going to ask a different question, I'm sure, but which is okay.
And just politically, we can't ignore the big influence that China has.
Yeah, and that's something you see happening now, a little bit of a standoff between the two powers. Kathy?
As part of the transition to the 538, would you consider 496 as the beginning of that transition?
I forgot what happens in 496. Is that Clovis? Okay. So this may be Clovis gets the papacy gets an army. I was thinking about Clovis as well. That might be a good one. Andreas. And then we're gonna bring it back.
This is just a thought that came to mind. Um, I haven't thought about it much, but isn't it all relative to the glorious land? Um, so the king of the north and the king of the south, we always understood that it's relative to the glorious land in a literal sense. And then I don't know how we apply that, but one idea would be making our reference point the glorious land, the that we know today. So Curtis asked me geographically. Uh, I don't think geographically. I think like in the application. So like the glorious land is the US. Yeah, I don't know. I just I have to develop that. But yeah.
So just saying maybe we should look at the players or the factions in reference to the glorious land, which would be the United States. And so find your other players in reference to that. So in theory, we we said that this woman could be any woman, any church. Gloria says no. Curtis says raised hand. So what is this woman? Let's just define this woman. That we were talking about the woman without the beast. Tell me about this woman, Curtis.
I'm gonna go a bit off topic. In Daniel 2, we have miry clay in the feet. That's the symbology. And the point we make about that is that it's a corrupted church in reference to God's church. In reference to God's church. So we create a true an account of it from that modeling. So we create a true an account of it from that modeling. And the counterfeit's characteristics have to be in reference to God's church. So when we speak about the woman in Revelation 17, Again, it's a corrupt church. But it's corrupt in reference to God's church. There's specific characteristics in God's church that it's counterfeiting.
What are those characteristics? Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. So
all I was going to say is when we start defining the church in 17, we have to stick in reference to God's church and a characteristic that we're pulling out of that.
Okay. I'm gonna pull a Elder Parmenter. And I'm gonna do a hard pivot with my line. And we're going to talk about something totally connected but different. So a couple things, and we're going to try to move quickly just so I can get them out and we can try to talk about them after. So let's go to Revelation 13. Okay, so, and we'll try to move quickly. So let's try to do short answers and just, we only have about 20 minutes left. So in Revelation 13, we have two beasts, correct? Beast 1. And what are the characteristics of this beast? There's a composition that it has. What's that composition? Lion, bear, and leopard. Lion, bear, leopard, correct? And then we see a different beast, beast number 2. Tell me about this beast. What's its characteristics? It's a lamb. What is the significance of putting these two beasts next to each other? What do we call that? Compare and contrast. We're taking these two beasts and they are very different. This first beast is defined by these predators. This second beast is we're going to call it an oppositional beast. It's oppositional to the first beast. In the sense that it's a contrasting symbol of a lamb. And you're about to forgive my horns. So we have two horns. Republicanism. And Protestantism. Briefly, what are both of those? What is republicanism? By the people. It is a republic. It is democratic. Oops, that's a B, not a D. Then we have Protestantism. What is Protestantism? Freedom of choice. Gloria said anti-Catholic in a very specific sense. Which is what? Andreas kind of said it, but he said it just in a different way. It is the separation of church and state. There's a nice wall right here. And another word for church is culture. That the culture won't dictate to the state. Now, I think it is absolutely worth sitting on top of the topic of culture. For this reason that I'm about to state. My culture is that my culture is the separation of church and state. It's pushes being for the people, human rights. And so that culture is going to dictate to the state. What does it create? The Constitution. You had a culture, an ideology that was positive, we'll say. And it influences the creation of this state or the way that this state is going to operate. If someone said to me, well, hold on there. We stand for the separation of culture and state. We don't want your human rights culture to dictate how this state should be run. Would you say that that person is right and we should have, you're right, we really should, we need the separation of culture and state in this instance? You'd say, no, that's exactly the culture you want to influence the state. That's good culture. So we have to define culture a little bit better, or more. Because there's always culture. We have to define what we mean by culture. Because I think we're actually going to say that there's good culture and bad culture. But that's a separate thought. Okay, where else do we see these two horns? So really Easy question. What? Kathy says Medo Persia. We're going to go to Daniel 7. So we have another two horns. That horn. We have the Medes and the Persians. And what else do we know about these two horns? Based upon Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. Or this is Daniel 8. Alyssa, just quick. One's smaller, one's bigger. Which one do we know which one's bigger? Persia. So the Persian horn is bigger than the the Medes horn. So what does that mean? More dominant? So let me ask you a question. Which horn is more dominant, republicanism or Protestantism? Whenever you want it to be. So Gloria said Protestantism is the more dominant horn. Do we agree with that? Disagree with that? Say again? We have some disagrees. I saw a head nod, so we had at least one or two agrees. Which horn is more dominant, the Republican horn or the Protestant horn? Let me ask you a question. What are these horns? Are they good things or bad things? Good. They're good things. So let me tell you a story. Let me take you in a time machine to the year 2013 or 14. Elder Jeff is giving a presentation. And he's going to say that these horns represent republicanism and Protestantism. What does he mean by Protestantism? Religion. He's going to say that this is the we'll just say religious. That this is literally the Protestant faith as being anti-Catholic. Then someone's going to stand up a few years later, and I can't remember if it was Elder Parmenter or Elder Test. I believe it was Elder Parmenter, but I could be wrong. And he's going to say, not really. It's not religious. It is the separation of church and state. It's not about, It's not a religious horn. It's the absence of religion. So let me ask you again, which horn is higher than the other? Is the horn of the separation of church and state more dominant than the horn of the state run by the people, that democracy, or vice versa? Jump back to 2014. Elder Jeff is going to go back to these horns in Medo Persia. And he's going to say, this is Protestantism and Republicanism just seen in Daniel 8 and 7. And he's going to say, look, the second one is higher than the other. The Persians are dominating. At some point, the Persians dominate the Medes. And using his line upon line methodology of the moment, two horns in Revelation 13, two horns in Daniel 8 must be the same two horns of Revelation 13. Give me 1 second. And then he's going to make a narrative that connects the story between the two of them. And the story is that the religious horn of Protestantism will get corrupted. And Protestantism will dominate republicanism. Apostate Protestantism will, instead of there being a balance of church and state, the church will gain the ascendancy. And dominate that relationship. And which we know is the image of the beast, the image of the beast right there. Church and state relationship. But the problem with that is when Elder Parmenter tells us that this horn is actually the separation of church and state, that's all it is. It's a principle in how the government is organized. I don't think these horns can be the same horns of Revelation 13. Or sorry, I don't think the horns of Daniel 7 and 8 are the same horns of Revelation 13. It made sense when it was a religious power, when we said it was Protestantism. As in the religion of Protestantism. But once you turn it into a institution, it doesn't work it doesn't seem to work anymore. And this is my question I'm raising. And let me say one more thing. This beast here, the first beast, we have these symbols here. It's a composite beast. I would argue that we already see Media Persia in the passage. It's the bear. This beast is a composite beast of the beast that came before it. And the bear is Daniel 7. So I think Media Persia is already accounted for. So the question ends up being, what are these horns? Okay, we're gonna stop there, and I'm gonna give just a 30-second summary. So we weren't able to finish our lineup here all the way. We had some more to say about this, but the fundamental thing we were looking at was the development of a multilateralism versus unilateralism. We're seeing sorry. And how the Republican Party is going to co-opt the unilateralism of the papacy as their own. And it's going to work to affect that unilateralism. And once you get to Trump here at the end, where we are now, all that unilateralism would be distilled into its worst form. And then we got sidetracked a little bit. And we looked at what does it mean to be the king of the north and when does that occur? And we identified a transition period. Which I think is correct, but these are all the things we're dealing with. And we said that this transition point begins when a church and state come together, or culture and state come together with ambitions to rule the world. And then we did a hard pivot to Revelation 13. And we looked at the horns of Revelation 13 and Daniel 8. And my suggestion is that I don't think that they're the same horns. Since we've changed the description of the Protestant horn. I'm willing to be wrong, but I just wanted to throw that out there. And that's where we got. All right, let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this time that we've had together. We thank you for your Sabbath day. We pray that you would be with us throughout the rest of this day. And that you would guide our hearts and our minds to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
We want to thank everybody for joining us today for our study, and we will close our meeting for now and be back at 4 p.m. We are on West Coast time, 8:18. God bless.